Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Hanley, a senior manager here at PayIt, and I'm going to welcome you to today's session on AI and government. Today, we'll be diving into one of the most transformative and complex topics that is shaping public services as we know them. During the session, we'll explore the opportunities and challenges governments are facing as they look to adopt AI. We've got some fascinating insights to share, including highlights from our recent webinar featuring Amelia Powers Gardner, the Commissioner of Utah County, Utah, and Jonathan Feldman, the CIO of Wake County, North Carolina. I've also brought along a few friends of mine from our own team here at PayIt. We've got Adam Christensen, the SVP of Product, and Mike Gutierrez, the Senior Director of Client Solutions. They both work directly with governments across US and Canada. So, AI is everywhere in the headlines right now, from tools promising to transform how we work to the challenges of implementation and trust. Mike and Adam, I am so glad to have you both here with me. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's set the stage. Let's turn to a recent report on from SAS on global Gen I adoption. It shows that while only 54% of organizations are actively implementing AI, only about 5% have a comprehensive governance framework, and 75% are concerned about data privacy and security risks. This data paints a clear picture that AI is a high priority investment, but many organizations are grappling with compliance, trust, and implementation challenges. So, Mike, let me start with you. How do these findings compare with what you're seeing in the cities and counties you work with?
I think it's pretty close. Many of the agencies that we've worked with are starting to dip their toes into the AI waters, but I do agree there are vast concerns around data privacy and security and just starting to put together the right framework to be able to tackle adding AI to their business.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Adam, I'll ask the same question to you. What challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, I think there's probably more nervousness than excitement in some agencies, and I think it's a very rational concern in terms of the privacy, the data, how much are we going to share? I think there's even a fair amount of concern about what does this mean for my job? Am I going to be replaced? These sorts of things. So. I am seeing those headwinds out there with agencies, and I think there's some. I think there's also some nervousness around, here we go again. Here's a tool instead of a problem we're solving with a tool. It's a solution that I'm asked to use in some way, right? To make it work for something, and sometimes that doesn't go that well with larger types of organizations. So it's just something to creatively solve with finding ways that make it interesting and compelling and useful to those in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that brings up a question of kind of trust and trust in AI. Now, what kind of are examples of something that you can see there of how to develop that trust with a tool like this? Mike, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is interacting with AI and understanding, what it's doing and using it and fact checking it and making sure that all of the inputs that you're putting in are getting the right outputs that you would expect. And if things are not going the right way and you're questioning what's coming out of it, that we are course correcting to ensure what's going on. One of the things, like if you choose to just, not dip your toe in the water and just, not go with the flow, like it ends up passing you by, right? So your opportunity to kind of develop it in the way that you want it and utilize some of the strategies that you're expecting to gain some significant outcomes with efficiency are just not there. So being able to kind of just make sure that you are interacting with it, understanding what's going on, fact checking along the way, making sure that you are having all the data and the security privacy that you're expecting and level of controls there are typically important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of trust, let's dig into what responsible AI adoption looks like in practice. In our recent webinar in December, Amelia Powers Gardner, the Commissioner of Utah County, Utah, shared how her county developed an AI policy that's both practical and effective. Let's listen to see what she had to say.
I think it's important to point out that when we talk about AI, there's several different types of AI, right? We've got generative AI. I personally use generative AI quite a bit when writing speeches. I have a thread that I have loaded dozens of speeches that I've given into this AI, so we can kind of learn my vernacular and how I speak. And I will ask it to write me speeches, and have taken the amount of time that it takes me to draft a speech down significantly using that. That's a generative AI. But then there's also machine learning. And this is where we're kind of using this in back office areas and utilizing machine learning to improve processes. This would be the assessor's office would be one of those examples where we're using this to catch anomalies and see changes and developments. The auditor's office can also use this in finance and budget analysis. You know, as people send us their budget requests for next year, and we're looking at increases, we can say, hey, highlight any budget line item that has an increase higher than 5%, so that we can hone in on those. And instead of having to look at thousands of line items for an entire county, this gives us the ability to analyze any of the ones that are just outside of the normal. But then also utilizing it to detect PII, and if someone is entering PII into a system that they shouldn't be, because maybe it's an open source system, us having the ability to hone in on that. So what we've done at the county is we've come up with a policy, and that policy says we want you to use AI because it makes things more efficient and effective. However, we want you to treat that AI like a freshman intern. We have to recognize that there's bias, and you need to double check everything you create using generative AI for bias and ensure that we're doing justice there. On top of that, you have to have you have to have training, and then anything you utilize AI for, you are personally liable for. You can't just blame AI for a mistake that was made. So double check everything, check it for bias, check it for hallucinations. And then we have to, of course, in order to do that, you have to know what those are. So we have a policy that says if you're going to use AI, that's fantastic. Just make sure you've taken the training and understand what your responsibilities as an employee are in the use of that AI.
Yeah, I love that. I love that she said, treat it like a freshman intern. It's probably one of my favorite quotes. I saw you also acknowledged it too, Adam. Can you comment too and kind of give your thoughts on what Amelia had to say?
Yeah, I think I think this is one of the mind shifts that I think we need to go through as individuals in approaching this new generative AI technology. What I love what Amelia is using it for. What she led with was the first draft, and I think we have to put it to work to do things that we may not enjoy. We may not enjoy that first draft. Let it spit out a draft, give us some ideas, generate AIs. That's what it's used for, or that it's built for and most useful for, is that type of work to generate content, ideas, brainstorm. And then you can apply your human brain to then tweak and take it from there and really do some of what I consider some of the more valuable thought. How do I want to evolve this talk, or how do I want to, in her case, also putting it to work to find anomalies. Well, instead of scanning, now you're thinking about the anomalies that have been found for you. So those are very exciting uses, and I think really good examples of ways that I think we as humans need to find those things we don't enjoy and put AI to work, and then let our brains actually add real value on top of that.
Absolutely. Let it be your intern.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike, any comments for you there? Any examples that you can share of something like this that you've seen?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of what Adam has said, right? In a lot of cases, this is how technology evolves, right? So we've seen this in a lot of different iterations. We saw it with cloud years ago, and we'll continue to see it with newer technologies like AI. So a lot of it is just, putting in the wrench time to make sure that as you utilize a platform and you're looking at the way the data is coming in and out, and you're kind of saying, okay, well, this isn't as perfect as I thought. Well, no, I don't just throw it all away. What did we learn from this? What does the next iteration look like? And then gain feedback from all of the key players and resources within the organization that are going to touch and utilize, right? It goes beyond just IT resources implementing a new technology tool, right? It requires insight from all of the key players that are going to be providing the inputs that are to go into it to help scale it out in a manner that to which they expect. So involving, finance and other departments that have some skin in the game to be able to make it successful will be very important to make sure that, as those iterations come up and we get more and more scale, they're getting all the outcomes they expect.
Right. Absolutely. And now I'd love to kind of get your thoughts because I know a lot of people are wanting some advice. So Adam, could you give me some thoughts that you might have and some advice to give people that want to starting out with AI, but might feel overwhelmed by the governance and the compliance side of things? Any
Yeah.
advice there?
I think everybody needs their personal use of it. I think they need to go try some things. It sounds bigger and bolder. And we've been throwing around this term for a long time. I mean, artificial intelligence, I've heard it basically my whole career. We finally have the compute and the data that's caught up with the original theories. But I'd say try it for fun. Get your organization, if you're an agency leader, ask your folks to go home and do it, use some in their personal life so they can see a path to saying, man, this could be helpful. I just typed in a prompt that said, write an angry haiku about Adam and Mike's webinar. And it spit out, Adam and Mike's chat, webinar wastes all my time. Mute them both for peace. It's fun. Like that's harmless. And it was actually, and so I've used that to generate some fun, entertaining content for my family, my mother-in-law, and just, so I think people need to find these angles to use it in their personal life, and man, how it can add value to me, and then how can it add value to us as an organization on the work front.
Yeah, gosh, Gilmore Girls is my thing. So I'll use it often to give me kind of synopses of episodes and all that. So I totally understand. What about you, Mike? Any advice that you can give folks that are looking to dip their toes into AI?
I mean, obviously don't be afraid, right, to be able to do it. And understand that you're not alone, right? Like there are a wealth of knowledge and resources out there for you to go tackle and utilize, whether it's, your peers or information on the internet or, partners like us that we're able to kind of help you through some of the nervousness and things that you may have with being able to dip your toe in the water, and being able to utilize some of those resources to understand, okay, I understand where all the boundaries lie. I understand where the things I need to be concerned with. I know where some of the potholes maybe lie so I can avoid those. We're all here to help, right? We're all here to help band together to make these technology solutions great. And so utilizing some of those resources definitely will help in those things.
Absolutely. I totally agree. All right. Now let's take it a step further and let's look at how governments balance the push for innovation with the operational realities governments face every day, as we all know. So Jonathan Feldman, the CIO of Wake County, North Carolina, shared a memorable example in the past webinar about the risks of rushing into AI projects without enough preparation. So let's take a listen.
Irrational exuberance comes to mind. The commissioner mentioned a lot of good ones, but when we considered very early doing a chatbot, and we decided no, because as it turns out, generative AI lies and makes things up. Now, another local government that was very large and very public decided, hey, let's do a chatbot. And even when there were several news articles about it telling people the wrong thing and telling people to do illegal things, they still wouldn't take it down. And that's what I mean by irrational exuberance. This stuff, of course, it's changed the world. We already know that. But to just be starry-eyed about it and want to use it no matter, and not acknowledge that it has significant serious limitations, of course you're going to run into problems. Now, there are better ways to do a chatbot nowadays, right? RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, comes to mind. And we are potentially going to release a chatbot. I can talk a little bit more about that if you like. But, in the early days, it was just bonkers to release a chatbot. And so, but there's so much pressure, right? People want to be seen as first. They want to be seen as innovators. My opinion, I want to be seen as useful, right? We have an obligation to residents, and it's not, the commissioner said it really well about tax dollars, but I'm also interested in where do we spend our efforts, and are we being responsible, or are we being reckless and crazy? I would rather not be reckless and crazy. I love doing new stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Adam, I can see you nodding your head there with Jonathan's thoughts. So I'd love your take on this, Adam. So how do you think that governments strike that balance between moving forward with new technology and ensuring they're being properly implemented?
Yeah. It's a great example that Jonathan raises. And I think my point of view is going back to a term that Microsoft has used for years. They call it eat your own dog food. In other words, point it internally first. I think there is, everybody wants to show the residents new cool things. My point of view is to avoid some of this, the issue that Jonathan was raising, is that really, spin up and try some of these chats internally. Almost every organization I know has bottlenecks of a few people that know how to do certain things, or they know the answers, or they know how to get them, or they have special access. And those folks could actually be doing other things if they didn't have to answer the questions of everybody else. And so those are the types of things that that we're exploring right now, is how do we light up some internal tools. Usually these folks have access to resident information anyway. It's not going to be publicly exposed at all, but really, how do we work out some of the kinks, step on some of the mistakes or other issues that Amelia raised as well, hallucinations they're called, when AI sometimes just makes stuff up. Do have that be only exposed to your internal organization for a while, and it's still unlocking some productivity, some new capabilities, and helping get rid of some of the bottlenecks. And then you get comfortable, and then I'd say the next phase would be, okay, what would we turn and have the residents experience? So even as a product guy, I'd love to just light it up for everybody, but that's how we're approaching it internally as an organization as well.
Yeah, that's great advice, Adam. All right, Mike, how about you? Any thoughts there?
The one theme I heard from Jonathan is like driving outcome, right? And I think having some, light at the end of the tunnel of like, what outcome are you trying to achieve is important when you're going down this AI path, right? Just introducing chatbot for chatbot's sake, or introducing AI to introduce AI's sake, may not gain the outcomes if you don't know what those are supposed to be, right? So understanding where you want to be able to realize some of those outcomes, even if they are internally, like Adam mentioned, could have resident impact downstream and you just don't know it, right? As people are getting more efficient and doing other processes than just being able to answer questions, or churning through data faster, or being able to process a document faster, like those are outcomes that everybody starts to see, including residents themselves, that can then be gained as leverage to go extend onto other technologies. But to Adam's point, I agree that like start out with an internal project and a resource, gain some momentum in being able to realize the outcomes that you've expected, and then figure out how to apply that as an externally facing outcome as you continue to expand the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice too, Mike. So another thing that Jonathan mentioned, and this is a question for both of you, he mentioned resource constraints. So what strategies have you seen that work for governments navigating these tight budgets or resistance to change? Adam, I'll send it to you first.
Yeah, it's a great one. There's not an easy answer per se.
Yeah.
There's certainly trial periods with almost all of these tools. Most of them are free for individual use, and so I would say, as a starting point, there's not a high barrier to entry in terms of getting acclimatized and getting the organization at least thinking about, wow, I could use this for this particular purpose to help my job, right? I would say, when it comes to protecting information, that's when the license fees really start to kick in with, hey, if you're going to feed it information that you don't want shared out, right, or commingled with other information to drive other models out there, that's where, hey, you start to wall off some of the data and information. And that, I think the way one approach is really to unlock that over time with, hey, look, there's a group that's very excited about it. Get some wins with a smaller price point, demonstrate what's possible, celebrate that, and then expand it out to those in the organization that are then ready or more ready from a mental perspective. I mean, nobody needs a tool that they're just asked to use if they're not really committed to using it yet. So, hey, roll that out in phases after some proven experiments.
Yeah, no, that brings to mind kind of a statement that I've heard my whole life: go slow to move fast. So just kind of take your time. Mike, how about you? Any thoughts there as well?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the theme about driving outcomes that I had mentioned earlier. Some of these things have long-term benefit, right, and cost savings, and it's really easy not to recognize that value up front, right, because you are investing time, money, resources into a strategy that may not give you the gains right away. But it's important to have a communication plan with being able to talk with individuals, understand what that could look like, right? What are these investments could gain us in terms of time efficiency, money savings, whatever those cases are, so that you can continue to kind of press down that path, even if it's just tiptoeing a little bit, to see, do those use cases that we expected, giving us the outcomes that we expect. I think the resistance to change thing is a funny thing. I think technology introduces resistance all the time, right? We do this in a lot of cases with a lot of these different types of technologies. But I think the important thing is, again, to address that head on, right? Is having those committees that are, multi-departmental focused, right? Having people feel like they've got some skin in the game and some feedback at the table, addressing concerns and questions, and giving them food for thought to be able to go home and think about and come back and say, hey, I thought about this a little more. Could it do this or that or something else, right? You start to really build some trust with the key parties involved that are going to be implementing and utilizing the technology, and be supportive of those outcomes going forward.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I completely agree, Mike. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from governance to trust to responsible adoption and overcoming challenges. So before we wrap, I'd love to leave our audience all on a forward-looking note. So Mike and Adam, as you work with cities and counties across the US and Canada, what excites you most about AI's potential to transform government services in the years ahead? Let's start with you, Adam.
I think what excites me most is some things that we haven't necessarily even envisioned yet. Sincerely so, just because sometimes our sights are set so much in the here and now, and applying the laws of physics that we have in front of us on how long things could potentially take. So I think for me, when I look at my product roadmap in our company, and I think, man, what if we started doing a whole page worth in the first couple quarters of the year? Then what? I think just the excitement of elevating our thoughts and our human brains into like well beyond the mundane of most of the day-to-day jobs that humans do now. What's possible out there? But the reality for government is, I think residents can have just much more engaging, exciting, smart interactions with government. I think it's sometimes those happen right now. Many times they just don't, and I think the expectations have really waned over the course of many years, as that delta between consumer grade experiences and in our private life and on the commercial side are compared immediately against what residents experience with government agencies. And I think really those coming back closer together and experiencing really a lot better, smarter, quicker, and more informative, experiences with government agencies. I think, man, I think that's really possible as we just root out a lot of really what holds us back from older tech these days. So that'd be my my hope, and I'm convinced. I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when.
Yeah, absolutely. Always looking to elevate the resident experience. That's always a good thing. Mike, how about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's the power of the technology and the future that it can provide. We all know that governments have older technologies, right? And it's really hard to kind of transition a lot of that stuff into modern based technologies. And I think these are one of the ways where AI can help us, accelerate some of those things to make it a more modern and easier experience, but also gain efficiency to be faster inside of tasks, whether it's within internal government or services that residents interact with, to be able to make their lives easier. I think about all of the consulting that we do with clients today and prospects, where you hear just the little tidbits of like, this process takes me an hour or two a day to go through, right? And you can think of, well, if there was only a thing that we can do to cut that down to 5 minutes, what would that look like? These are the emerging technologies that can help us set the stage to be able to do a lot of that stuff and be able to make that more efficient for those players. And they can go spend their time doing more valuable things to the business instead of having to do that 2-hour mundane task that takes them forever to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sharing such wonderful and valuable insights today. And thank you to everyone that's joined us. We way appreciate you being a part of this conversation. If you'd love to learn more, we encourage you to check out the full webinar replay of the December webinar, the generative AI report that I mentioned, and some additional resources that is shared on the handout section on the right side of your screen. Thanks so much and have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.